Well, hello there, friend, and welcome back to another episode of Artworks for Teachers. I'm your host, Susan Riley. And in a world where aliens come to life and come to Earth as cars, does that sound like a movie trailer that maybe somebody in your family might want to watch? If so, you're really going to like today's episode. I am joined by Billy Almon, who is I have to get this right, an astrobiofuturist. And he works at the intersection of astrophysics, biology, and futurism. And he uses creativity as the through line for all three. And actually, in his background, he has worked in movies, he's worked in television, he's worked with Disney, he's worked all over the place, and has had so many experiences of merging so many unseemingly uh, connected ideas together. And so, in today's episode, he's going to walk us through how you establish these connections, how you leverage STEM and the arts together so that they're not two distinct parties working together, but in fact are all one working in tandem. He brings in the idea of biomimicry in nature. He starts talking all about futurism and how we future cast. I think you're going to find this episode both fascinating as well as practical, because I think you're going to be able to take some of the frameworks that he uses and bring them into your classroom in a really interesting way. So I can't wait for you to tune in. Without further ado, here's Billy. Well, hi, Billy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
So good to see you, Susan. How are you?
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So, I always like to begin our show with allowing our guests to just share their journey so far. Journey in terms of how did you begin the work that you're doing now? What caused you to get into it? What are you doing now in terms of your work, and what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, greetings, people of Earth. Uh, I am Billy Almon. I'm an astrobiofuturist, which essentially means that I am exploring how nature has the potential within these hidden blueprints that exist in the natural world to improve the human condition wherever humans may find themselves, which is primarily on Earth. And the way that that kind of comes to life in a lot of fun ways for me is being able to go out and learn more about the natural world and learn more about indigenous connections to the land and to the earth, and then being able to find ways where these hidden blueprints in the natural world and these insights from wisdom of the past can inform how we create better and bolder futures. And a big part of how that's coming to life for me right now is in being able to talk to a lot of students in STEM and also STEM educators about how to build these big, bold futures.
That's amazing. And I had not heard the term astrobiofuturist until until we were researching for this show, and I'm like, that is such a cool job title. And first of all, who knew that that was even kind of a job? What led you to this kind of work? And did you create that term? Like, did you make it up?
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. So one day, and I think this actually happened early on in the pandemic. I was going through all of the things that I had done in my career, working for Disney as Imagineer, filming a TV show for Animal Planet, being one of the only wildlife hosts of a cable television show with that Animal Planet show. And then this work of exploring nature's blueprints through this concept of biomimicry, and even within that realm of biomimicry, a lot of the things that I was looking at were the applications for space exploration.
Mhm.
And around that same time, things with George Floyd took place, and so I was in a very contemplative space of where can I put all of these unique experiences I've had, and how do they come together in a way that can be some kind of gift or contribution? Because I think, by all accounts, I've been blessed and had a really cool professional and personal life. And so I was writing in my journal, my sketchbook, and I had these three bubbles of space exploration, of biomimicry, and of what I've learned about creating bold futures from my time at Imagineering. And I just kept kind of like subconsciously writing, and I kept breaking down the passions and the insights of those three areas. And where I landed on was this bubble that said space, and then below it said astro, and then biomimicry, and then bio underneath it. And then the work that I was mostly doing for Imagineering about thinking 10, 20, 30 years ahead of what's possible and how to reverse engineer those possibilities into reality. And so then I wrote futurist under that. And my wife at the time, she saw what I wrote down. She was like, that's the work that you're doing now, in these three different avenues. But if you combine them, that is also who you are. And so that term came through me exploring, I'm doing these three things in these buckets, but I also see each piece of these buckets in each individual section. And then that's really where the term came from. And it also made me realize that there's so many people, all people have this multifaceted nature to them. But right now there's really only one bucket that seems to be the only bucket they can fit in, which is why I think a lot of people don't, necessarily feel fulfilled as much as they can right now. And so part of this work of me being an astrobiofuturist is also helping people to find ways for these multifaceted other venues and presentations of themselves to coexist in the work that they're looking to do and the futures that they're looking to build.
Amazing. One of my mentors, Marie Forleo, calls it multi-passionate. And I love
Yes.
that because it doesn't make you fit and conform into a box, right? And it's what we talk about with STEAM education all the time, that even within STEAM, right, we still have these boxes of, well, that's the creative part, and then we have the
Yeah.
science part over here, and we have the math part over here, and it's not how the world works.
No, it is
It's
not.
not how we're designed to live. And so I would imagine in your work, the through line, if you will, is the creative problem solving that comes along with each of those
Hmm.
areas, right? How do you explore that, investigate that, and bring that to the surface when you're working in STEAM education or with others who are working in STEAM?
What I love about that question is, creative problem solving. Um, the solution is always creative, right?
Mm,
So the solution to any problem is something that was created or thought up or imagined.
mhm,
And so it doesn't matter whether you are an accountant, an engineer, or a designer. Creativity has no uh, what do we call them in church? Denomination, right?
mm,
There's no
yes.
denomination for creativity where it solely sits in there. Creativity is the practice of taking in information and reinterpreting it into a new expression that addresses some type of problem or challenge, right? And makes that problem or challenge easier to experience, or turns that problem into a new type of solution, right? And so
Yeah.
the thing with STEM and with STEAM is you don't really realize how much STEM and STEAM are omnipresent in everything that we do. And so because we have these typical ways of identifying it, we don't realize that we're constantly interacting with science and we're constantly creating technologies. I think over time we've kind of developed an idea that technology is this microphone and this headset, but we don't realize that technology is the means and methods of doing something, right? So
Yes.
when you're applying for a patent, you have to fill out this huge form, and at the top of it, it's kind of at least the last time that I remember this, it was labeled the means and methods of XYZ, right? And that is what a technology is. So we don't realize that we are constantly creating technologies anytime that we are trying to address a challenge.
Right.
And when you start to kind of peel back the layers of what these words mean, that's also where I think, for me, the fun in working with organizations and educators is helping them see how accessible STEM and STEAM are, and how they're really embedded into everything that we try to do in the daily.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the idea of breaking them apart, really looking at what they mean. The idea of engineering for me is always so interesting because I feel like engineering and creativity and the arts kind of just they all work the same. Like it
Yeah, yeah.
just there's more alike than unalike, as Maya Angelou would say. Now you talked about biomimicry,
Hmm.
and I want you to explain exactly what biomimicry is first. But then I would love to explore how does biomimicry um, manifest itself in when we're in the world as we're looking at it in terms of inventions, ideas, how we come up with new stuff.
Yeah, so biomimicry is a term that was created by a brilliant woman, and a dear friend named Janine Benyus. And it speaks to the idea of emulating the strategies that have existed in the natural world, how
Mhm.
organisms in nature go about solving problems in their biology, and
Okay.
then essentially copying those strategies and imitating them to create solutions at the human scale. And another way that I like to say that is, it is exploring and identifying which of nature's blueprints for solving a problem we can apply to the problems that we now have, because there's so many things about nature that are inherently entrepreneurial, inherently sustainable, and inherently innovative and efficient. What nature understands, not in an like anthropomorphized way, but like biologically, right?
Okay. Yeah.
There are what nature understands is that there are limits, right?
Mm.
There are limits to the amount of available resources that can exist at any given time in any given location, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And there's often ebbs and flows of access to these resources.
Okay.
So organisms, let's take a desert for example. What is
Hmm.
the number one resource, the premium resource in a desert?
Water. Right.
Water, right? So organisms that have to live in that environment have to be extremely efficient with how they
Mhm.
use water, and extremely innovative in how they collect and store that water, right?
Mm. Okay. Yeah.
So the entrepreneurial part comes out in the way that through natural selection and just mutations in our DNA, certain um, you know expressions of our genetics um, create different adaptations, right? So for example, why are cacti covered in spikes?
That's a good question. I used to know the answer, and I do not. I'm coming up with blank.
So okay, this is great. This is great. This might not. I don't know if this is gonna make the podcast or not. I'll be
Oh,
honest.
good.
But
This is me learning. This is my classroom, right?
okay,
This is good.
yeah. So the spikes that we see on a cactus are
Hmm.
really modified hairs. And
Oh.
if you're in a desert and you have this ability to tap into water below, deep groundwater, with your roots, and pull up water through capillary action and store it in your body as a cactus,
Mhm.
right? And other animals know that you can store that body, you can store
Mm.
that water. That means you have to protect that
Yes.
water source, right?
Yeah.
So over time, cacti have developed these different methods of protecting themselves from predators who would come on and try to gather some of that water from their body, right?
Yeah.
So those spikes are a deterrent, right, against people infringing on their resources, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Now, the other part of that, though, is that to pollinate, you do want to attract certain other organisms that can facilitate that exchange. And so you have to be willing to offer something up in exchange for the resources that you're getting back in terms of pollinating. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where, like the flowering comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that you're
Yeah.
attracting very specific, you're marketing yourself in very
That's
specific
good now.
ways to a target audience that is
Yes.
conducive to the type of exchange that you need,
Yes.
right?
I see that now. Yes.
So when you think of ecosystems, ecosystems are really marketplaces where there are
Mm.
exchanges of all types of commodities that are taking place in a chemical, multicellular, type of way that we don't necessarily see, but the same rules of a marketplace and the same type of sense of managing risks and
Mm-hmm.
identifying opportunities are taking place in the natural world just as much as they are on Wall Street.
I love that. That's so interesting. Oh my gosh. Just like mind blown right there, Billy. I had no idea that it was those spikes were like hairs. Had no idea.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing. And just the idea, you're right, absolutely, that there's this exchange of, you give, I give. It's an exchange of value, which is essentially what business is if we break it down, right? Just that's so fascinating. So how does the science of biomimicry and astrophysics and all the other things that you work on, how does that work and engage with the arts, to either enhance what is offered or as a pathway towards what's offered?
Yeah, I love that. So that brings me to something else that I meant to say. So the thing about nature is, by most um, you know uh, systems of belief, the natural world has existed longer than what we identify ourselves as humans to have existed, right?
Mhm.
So they've had a head start. The natural world has had a head start on developing and identifying strategies that can um, sustain, be sustainable, and allow life to continue for generations and generations. So there's a lot of R&D that has already happened in the natural world. And that's
Mhm.
why we now have these blueprints that are kind of hidden in the patterns that you have to look for in nature.
Mhm.
And so what I get to do and what I love doing is telling the stories of how those blueprints not only work, but how they can be applied to coming up with solutions. And so the storytelling of it for me is where that artistic role really comes into play, because
Mhm.
it is not only storytelling it verbally, but it's also, okay, how do I illustrate the
Mhm.
idea that you and I are like seaweed in this ocean of uncertainty that exists in the world around us right now? How do I
Yeah.
help people understand that, right now it's important to be anchored to something in the same way that the roots of seaweed are anchored around a rock, and it's important to be flexible in a way that the seaweed is also flexible in the ocean while still being anchored. So it's not just the painting with the words that help tell that story, but it's
Yeah.
also, how do I get you to emotionally connect to
Mm.
seaweed
Yeah.
in a way where you can see yourself as the seaweed, that would allow you to understand that even in this crazy time in the world around us, there are still opportunities for you to stay afloat while being flexible and being anchored in the place that you're in, and thrive in this unwavering dynamic of a swirl that is the world right now. Does that
Yes.
answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I think there's so we have so many conversations around why the arts are valued, what or are they valued, why should they be valued, what do they contribute to the world, and it feels very transactional. And
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of folks who say things like, it's the arts make the world worth living. They absolutely do. But what I
Mm-hmm.
think that you've just illustrated so beautifully is that the arts actually give you the mechanism to see how the world continues to evolve and grow and move and change and become, right? Including all
Yes.
of us. It's the mechanism itself that allows us to do that. So I'm so excited to hear that, which is amazing. Um, and so I know that creativity is a part of who you are. You've talked about being an Imagineer for Disney. I'm curious because you said that as a part of that, you had to imagine what the world could be in 10, 20, 30 years, right? And be able to kind of future cast. What does that process look like? How do you do that? And how do you know when you've gone too far, if you haven't gone far enough? And how do you use creativity to help you get there?
Yeah. Well, I love all these questions. They're so good. And what I've discovered from, not just the time at Imagineering, but also from exploring the natural world, is there's this framework that works for me, at least,
Mhm.
that I like to share, whenever I'm working with an organization, or with students. And it is, there's these three components to taking something that feels impossible and reverse engineering it into something that is real. And I call it the DAT framework, which is dream, adapt, thrive. And that first part, the dreaming part, is really where you are first identifying, okay, what is our North Star? What is our point of orientation? What is the thing that we are really trying to change in the world? This can be a theory of change,
Mhm.
or it could just be, what is an aspiration that we have? You know, um, in this futurism work, one of the things that I've learned is that you don't create the future. You can, but what tends to happen is that that future can shrivel up because it doesn't
Mm.
have enough support around it. And so what I've
Mhm.
learned is that what you actually want to do is you want to create the world where that future can emerge. And
Mhm.
you create that world by identifying the collection of ecosystems that
Mhm.
need to be interconnected, that can sustain the growth and development of that
Mhm.
future, so that that future can not only live but thrive, especially
Mhm.
thrive through the adversity of the future becoming real.
Yeah.
And so that first idea of, what is the aspiration we have, what is the thing that we want to exist in the world,
Mhm.
and it actually takes me back to movie making and trailers.
Mhm.
When you see a trailer and they say, in a world where alien robots come to Earth and disguise themselves as vehicles, right?
Mhm.
What those trailers are doing is they're setting the rules, the
Mhm.
foundation for you to understand how things operate in that world. And so part of this process of world building is setting those ground rules. Okay,
Mhm.
what is the thing in this world that in our current world would be abnormal, but in our desired world is the norm?
Mm. Yeah.
And that normal thing is the thing that you're saying is that North Star aspiration.
Gotcha.
So you set that first aspiration, and then you start to essentially, you know, throw a lasso around that star that you've cast and
Mhm.
start to reverse engineer the steps to make that a reality. I
Mm.
don't know if that made
That
sense,
totally, yeah, that
but
totally makes
okay.
sense. And as you're describing it, I'm envisioning one of my last trips to Disney where I actually you go in to see, or a theme park of any kind, where you're seeing worlds put together. Um, and it's like walking through Pandora, right? Like at Animal Kingdom, that you see the world and it establishes those parameters for you so that you can feel like you're actually there and suspend reality just long enough that this
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. And what else I loved about what you said is that really creativity is living within constraint,
Mm-hmm.
and that you set those constraints, right? And to allow for new things to flourish, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes overlooked when it comes to creativity. So I love that you shared that with us. Like, I could learn from you all day. Like, I cannot believe that our time is almost up. This is
Oh my
crazy.
gosh. Yeah.
I have learned so much already. I feel like I just took a science class, so thank you.
I'm
Um,
so glad.
for those who are listening and would love to learn more about you and your work, or to bring your ideas into their classrooms, how can they find out more and get in touch with you?
Yeah. So, if those are things that you're interested in, if you think I can help, email me at connect@billyalmon.com.
Perfect.
And I'm on all of the socials. So at Billy underscore ALMON.
Mhm.
Or to learn more about me and my work, you can also visit my website at billyalmon.com. Um,
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah. We will put all of that into the show notes so that it makes it easy for everybody to find you and get in touch. Billy, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a true pleasure.
Likewise, the pleasure is mine. Thank you again.
Of course.